You are listening to No PC Allowed, aka No Political Correctness Allowed, and I am Mac Iverson. The problem with the excessive presidential use of executive orders should be obvious. We are now crossing the Rubicon, an era transitioning away from the Vice President Brandon era of naked corruption and his unconstitutional use of mega executive orders, and evolving into the polar opposite, in many ways, era of Trump's second term. And things are changing rapidly due to his aggressive use of executive orders. So we have this whiplash back and forth energy going from a power-mad flaming nut, that being Vice President Brandon's socialist activism, and then the power goes to a swamp-draining nut cracker, that being President Trump. If the socialist fascist deep state via Brandon can use a ton of illegal executive orders, well then, why can't Trump do the same thing merely to defeat all of the prior excessive use of executive orders from the deep state? After all, it was all illegal to begin with. This from Jeffrey Tucker in the Epoch Times. You can scour the founding documents all day and find very little support for government by executive order. It was not supposed to be this way. It should not have to be this way. The president, under the Constitution, has a very limited role. That said, most of the many executive orders issued by President Donald Trump are purely restorative, a reaffirmation of core constitutional structures that have been previously ignored or overthrown. Therefore, these are not acts of executive imposition so much as deployments of power in order to give power back to the people. In other words, most of the actions are not about the imperial presidency. They are about returning power to where it belongs and never should have left, namely to the U.S. Constitution and to the voters in a Republican system of government. This is why all the chatter about Trump's use of power, he's behaving like a dictator, misses the mark completely. Let's just consider one that is near and dear to my heart, restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship. It does nothing other than restate the meaning of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which proclaims that government cannot interfere with the freedom of speech. This article continues. Is this order enforceable? One can hope but not be certain. The institutions and money out there favoring censorship are voluminous. It is likely going to require more than a proclamation to make the First Amendment real again. Moreover, much of the prevailing censorship is now deeply embedded in algorithmic structures on Google and YouTube. No human is operating it anymore. It will take human hands to rip out the coding that makes it all possible. And keep in mind that this happens today with no direct state involvement. So it is possible that current censorship operations will continue while being technically in compliance with the order. That is to say, this order should have been issued many years ago, since this censorship has been happening for much longer than 4 years. In fact, it was in full operation during the first term of Trump, likely in a way that was unbeknownst to the Trump administration. One has to admire how Trump 2.0 has made a concerted effort here to take charge and really mean it. Unquote. In other words, we must be careful. What do conservatives and libertarians scream about all the time? We must obey the Constitution. Now, don't get me wrong, there is no bigger fan of draining the swamp than I am, but it sets a very dangerous precedent to have all these executive orders flying all around constantly after just a few weeks of Trump being in office. And I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to throw it all out there at once so that no one executive order that may seem very controversial get all the attention and be shot down. Nevertheless, there are tons of executive orders going on right now. After all, if he can do it, then another president with the opposite viewpoint of MAGA patriots can certainly do it. And why wouldn't he? The precedent has already been set with President Trump's energetic penmanship. This is where the exaggerated screams of, "Trump's a fascist," from liberals comes from. Obviously, useful idiot liberals never gave a rip about controlling overly energetic executives like Obama and Brandon, who did much worse than Trump could ever dream of doing with their blatantly unconstitutional executive orders, which are too numerous to mention here. All the libtards just wanted their side to win by hook or by crook. But the convenient argument or precedent will always be there because of Obama's and Brandon's showboating aggressive penmanship, and also because it's so easy to just scribble one signature on a page for a quick, easy headline and photo op. The deep state-controlled demon rats have been actively anti-American and anti-Constitution for several generations now, and their illegal legislating from the executive branch, that's the job of Congress, is what Trump is desperately trying to fix in the only way he knows how. Our very first president had the right idea. This from The New American by John McManus. In 1793, during his first term, George Washington issued an executive order declaring America's neutrality in the war between France and England. Our first president soon realized that the protests of Madison and Jefferson against his executive mandate were correct. He then asked Congress to issue a law declaring the sought-after neutrality, and Congress complied. There were no more presidential misuses of executive order power for approximately 70 years. Unquote. Unfortunately, we do not live in the same sane country as we did then. But the main tool for massive flanking maneuvers outside the Constitution was not just unconstitutional left-wing executive orders. Rather, it mostly came from the, air quotes, charitable contributions from the billionaire set associated with the Soros crime family and their proxies. They have, by far, done the most damage and, in fact, have directly led to these damaging orders. Crime boss Alex Soros made an estimated some 30, 40, 50 trips, it's unknown, to the White House during the Brandon regime. But closely associated with all the Trump executive orders is the creation of DOGE, or DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. From Veronica Kirilenko in The New American. While public discourse is consumed by a deluge of executive orders and scandalous exposés of waste and corruption, the Trump administration, with Elon Musk's United States DOGE service at the helm, is quietly executing a radical AI-driven overhaul of federal operations. What was pitched as a reasonable efficiency initiative is rapidly escalating into a full-scale AI revolution, one that raises serious concerns about oversight, transparency, and the unchecked power of unelected technocrats. While the public fixates on taxpayer waste, the real transformation is happening behind the scenes. Washington isn't just being streamlined, it's being reprogrammed. The article goes on. Left unsaid is that efficiency comes at a price, trading bureaucrats for algorithms and human oversight for AI control. You voted for it, or did you? The narrative has now escalated. This isn't just about fixing waste. It's what Americans supposedly voted for. But let's be clear. Musk was not on the ballot, and his AI takeover was never part of the campaign. Yes, the cuts are necessary, but outsourcing the entire operating system of the U.S. government to AI, that was never up for debate. The friendly oligarch. The Founding Fathers despised oligarchy, understanding that when power concentrates in the hands of the few, liberty is the first casualty. James Madison, the architect of the Constitution, put it plainly. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. What they feared was not just monarchy, but any elite class, corporate, political, or technological, that could override democratic checks and establish rule by the unelected. And yet, here we are. From efficiency to technocracy. With DOGE teams embedded throughout the federal government, armed with AI tools, what was presented as an efficiency initiative is now morphing into an AI-driven technocracy, perfectly aligned with the globalist ambitions of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. While Musk's automation crusade may shrink the federal workforce, the actual functionality of government could expand beyond anything previously imagined, turning governance into a self-sustaining AI-operated apparatus with unprecedented reach and power. Make no mistake, up to 80% of the U.S. federal government is unconstitutional. The New American and its parent company, the John Birch Society, have long argued this. Yet the remedy for this is straightforward, free and low-tech, returning governance within constitutional boundaries, with most functions performed at the local level. Handing the operating system of the U.S. government to a single unelected billionaire under the guise of reform isn't just a dangerous gamble. It's a direct threat to the republic that the founders would have recognized instantly. With sweeping control over AI governance, defense contracts, space infrastructure, treasury operations, and the automation of federal agencies, the real question isn't whether Musk is a disruptor. It's whether he's consolidating power faster than any establishment figure before him. Unquote. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. We have that wheel of progress already. It's called the Constitution. It's not what liberals call a living Constitution, meaning an easy-to-alter piece of parchment. Rather, it is our sacred Constitution. We don't need constant improvements due to changing times. Times may seem to change, but that usually happens very slowly. What doesn't change is human nature, and more important, God does not change. These two universal constants should make life on Earth very stable. Add to that our virtually unchanging Constitution, and you've got the perfect recipe for stability and peace, not just in America, but on Earth. Because every country on Earth, if they're smart, will try to perfectly copy the United States of America and our way of looking at life. You're going to see that more and more in the coming weeks, months, and years, and hopefully decades. Action step, only one. This from John McManus in The New American. Government by presidential executive orders must cease. Most Americans, once they are made aware of this illicit process, agree they should let their congressmen and senators know that rule by a single man is wrong, and a return to rule by properly enacted law, when constitutionally sound and needed, is the true American way. Unquote. This can only come from a strong and unified America. Trump's main vision for America is to not just be free from woke and deep state insanity, but to also unite us. Unite the United States of America once again. You've been listening to No PC Allowed. I am Mac Iverson. We will meet again next week and every week.